You know, obviously, if somebody picks up the phone and says, I want to book Metallica or Metalhead, Motorhead or somebody, then if there's money on the table, then probably they'd consider it. But I think the perception is probably that things are quite late, things are quite poorly organised a lot of the time, and I know that that's very unfair. You know, we've done...
In many cases it isn't. I mean, we're out to change that. But
my experience has been good, but I can imagine that it's not always like that.
Is there a touring circuit here? I mean, how a new young band, how do they get exposure within their own country, and are there venues, you know, that like in London, you start off, you play a 200 capacity venue, and then you move up to 400 capacity,
but the thing
and
in India is
gradually, you know, you build up to the size of the venues, and also your slots at festivals reflect.
The big difference now that I've been in the UK as well as India is that India is not a ticket-driven market at all. Nothing here runs on tickets. You know, so when you say, so the reason you're saying 200 capacity venue is because those 200, the money that the 200 tickets generate will be able to pay off most of the expenses for that gig.
Yeah.
Which doesn't translate directly to India, especially because of the currency difference. So just to throw numbers on the table, an average entry to a club, you were at Blue Frog a couple of days back, and the entry there was 300 rupees, which is under £5 for a club of that size. So let's say you get 500 people paying £300 each, 300 rupees each, which is, for current purposes, it's about £4. You know, it just doesn't translate to the band's fees, their travel to the venue, and stuff like that. And you can't play more than one club in Bombay in a month.
I think if I was advising one of my clients about coming to India, there's two different ways to look at it. You know, some bands tour because they love playing, they like having new experiences and seeing a different country, maybe combine it with a holiday. There's a vast number of artists out there that would come to India just for those reasons. A lot of other artists, particularly the ones that are already quite busy or are more professional or have got record deals that they need to recoup and sell some units, they obviously want any trip to India to be an investment to lead to a second or a third or a fourth visit. Now, my perception is, you know, you could go into a club where nobody knew you, do a brilliant show, everybody loves it and they come up to you, but the question is, does that...
What is the kind of investment that a band needs to be ready for? For, let's say, a month's tour, which makes sense to them.
Yeah, I can talk about Germany. We do this for Germany every year. This year we did a 3-month tour. Stayed there for 3 months, and in terms of costs, you want to know?
Yeah.
So you need to invest, obviously you need to look for a house for the band to stay in. Accommodation, that's important. Travel tickets, air tickets, accommodation is the main thing, and then per diems for food, etc. So that's what the main expenses are, and the rest is covered by tour fees, by the gig fees. You do about 15, 16 shows and you most likely end up covering up your investment.
Okay. And how would an Indian band that is really not known in the UK, or you know, has some sort of Indian following? Okay, let's actually address that issue. Most bands, when they go out from here, play to an Indian community in say the UK or in Europe, because one Indian community has paid for them to come over, and that will be their gig to... I don't know if it's much in the case of electronic music, but in the mainstream or in the regional music especially, a lot of the times that we've been called, for example, to go and play in various places is because an association of Indians there really wanted to hear something like our music, so it reminds them of home or something. But when they come there, they then try and book a tour after that. And the perception is very different, because the local community might pay a lot more than a festival would for the same band to come and play. So how would an Indian band go about charging there, and what do you say good fees are?
I think, you know, a question I always get asked about being an agent is, if you take on a new act, they kind of want to know what they can expect from you. And you know, there's only, in the UK we work 37.5 hours per week, so most agents maybe work 45 to 50 hours a week. You know, if you would represent 20 or 30 bands, you have to spread your time and energy across your whole roster, and generally the acts that are easiest to book are the ones that you spend the most time on. So clearly, if you took on an act from India where they would, even if they paid for their own travel and they were based in it, they rented a flat or something, I mean, I think 3 months is probably quite a long time, but you know, probably what made you successful is that you had a really close working relationship with your agent, and they really cared. And I think clearly, at the very beginning, just working with an agent, maybe like somebody in my company, whilst with the best will in the world, they could say this is an act that I really believe in, but are they really going to get all the love and attention that it's going to translate something where you could do 5 dates over 3 weeks to having 20 dates over 3 weeks or 18 dates? And actually, the difference in time between getting 10 and 20 is probably 5 or 6 times more energy to get those extra 10 shows. They're still there, and they could still make the difference between you breaking even or losing money, but is an agent who's got other things going on that, with acts that are easier to work, are they really going to make that extra effort to get the last few gigs that are going to stop you losing money or even make you make money? Which is why I think at the beginning it really has to be a manager or somebody who's either got an interest, like a lawyer or a label guy or a member of the family or somebody that loves them so hard they're just going to go hell for leather. I think that's what it takes at the beginning.
I have a flip side to that actually. For our tour, our agent couldn't even book one show.
Right, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Well, we ended up booking all our shows through.
Once you've done it first time, they'll probably do great, you know. But I think at the beginning, just getting it rolling, I think is actually beyond. You know, an agent might do the first easy 5 or 6, and then the hard 10, 15 other gigs. That's got to be someone that's really got time and energy.
So, if I had to also contrast between Sohail and you, what would draw your attention to a band that you'd probably like to represent in India? And how would an Indian band draw your attention?
I think without sounding arrogant, you know, I always say when I'm interviewing for new agents, you know, being organised and being a good negotiator and sending contracts and being able to send 300 emails a day, those are all things which can make you a successful agent. But the one thing that is going to make you a good agent is being able to look at 100 acts. You know, imagine if you were like doing speed dating and you looked at 100 acts and you didn't know anything about them, even if they all had the masks on, so you couldn't even tell what colour their skin was. If you could pick out the one band that you had a feeling about and make those successful, which a lot of agents can do, that's really the key. So actually, it doesn't really matter to me where they're from or what they look like or what their story is. You just have to have a feeling about the music, and that's a very indefinable, intangible thing. You know, why would I like 1 out of 100 acts if I didn't know who they were? That's just the feeling, and you have to have a conviction. And you know, I've worked with loads of agents who are great talkers and good networkers and have got good relationships, but when it actually comes down to saying, bullet to the head, you know, which band are you going to go for, your life depends on it, they just wouldn't know because they're followers, you know, they're people that listen to what everybody else is talking about or read who's
So what is it that, like, how will I am an unknown Indian band and I need to approach you to, I'm possibly the best band you've ever heard, but how will I draw your attention?
I just think you just have to trust, you know, in the same way that you trust yourself about, do I like this song that we've just riffed out, you know, you're jamming and somebody plays a riff and you're like, that's what we're going to focus on the same tune. It's the same conviction that an agent has, and you know, if I
would you go by how many fans they have on their Facebook? How many people follow them?
That's part of what backs up the argument, but I think those questions come second, you know, or third or fourth. You know, really, I just have to listen to it, and yeah, clearly there are some people who I trust who say, oh, you need to listen to this, and then I'll listen to it, and if I agree, then things happen. But you know, clearly networks and social networks and press and media, all that stuff counts, but really, you know, I think you still have to have that feeling. I mean, Tom says himself, he would never promote a band that he doesn't like. It doesn't matter who's telling him. And even if it's an agent that he always works with, I mean, you can say that.
But Tom, do you think that's the case with all festivals? Would they trust a promoter blindly to book a stage or a booking agent to completely book a program, a stage? Or would the owner of the festival have, you know, personal interest? Do you think that's across the board in the UK?
I think there's all different sort of political reasons why certain acts get booked for festivals and don't get booked. You know, like a headline act you might book and that agent will say, look, you know, can you put these bands on? And it's quite hard to sort of fight against that agent, you know, say, okay, they say we put 3 and you'd be like, put 1. And can you put 2? You know, we've got the headliner. And you have to fight against that. And you know, sometimes that's quite a hard decision. You might not like that band, you might not think it will work, but it's a political thing, it's long. You know, I promote a lot of bands as well, so I'm talking to these agents all the time about other bands and other things. So it's, you know, for me, I sometimes find it hard fighting against agents, you know, for those reasons. And I think that happens across all festivals. You know, there'll be you know, relationships with certain agents, and you'll book bands because of that. Yeah, so I think a lot of different reasons, you know, and some promoters, you know, I mean, the Underage Festival is, I don't particularly like all the acts on that, but that's a very unique event because it's between 13 and 17-year-old audience, and I have to book acts at that market. Like, I'm 34, I don't know what 13-year-olds are particularly into. You know, Radio 1 are media partners, and you know, we've got a big Facebook following and stuff, so we can tap into different, you know, a young market. But I won't book acts that you know, most of the lineup, some acts, you know, honestly, I've never even heard, but it doesn't matter. You know, they have a big following for 13-year-olds, and that's what the festival is about. And those 13-year-olds will have an amazing time watching that band. I don't even know what they sound like. But Field Days are totally reversed. I know what every band sounds like. I own most of the albums. You know, I have a passionate gut feeling. You know, and I will fight those agents and say, no, I'm not putting that band on. It won't work.
But I was going to say, just about from the Indian artist's point of view, I honestly think you definitely need a really good friend over in England who is hooked up with people. They don't have to be the best, but you really need to, you know, I can't think of a world music act, or sorry, an international act, who isn't from Western Europe or from Australasia. So someone from Japan or Africa or India or any of the countries that are kind of off the radar a little bit. I can't think of any that have made it over here without somebody discovering them, who's either like Soil and Pimp Sessions from Japan that we look after. They were discovered by Giles Peterson when he was in Japan. I mean, no Japanese bands are successful in Europe, but these guys were. You know, I can think of, you know, the guy that was first discovered Tanaroen in Mali or wherever they're from. You know, that was somebody that worked at WOMAD who's, you know, and obviously we've already said world music's not the right hook, but you know, somebody could come up to me, I might see something tonight or tomorrow, and I think, Jesus, this is amazing. If they came to me and we started working together, guaranteed they'd be way up the ladder towards making it than they probably were without me being here.
So in the Indian context, how does it work? How does someone attract your... I mean, I'm sure you check out quite a few of the gigs that happen and know about the music scene in India. But if there is still someone who's just experimenting at home and playing small sessions that is off your radar, how would they attract your attention?
Is this in context of Indian acts?
In India, yeah. Or also maybe acts abroad. How do they even contact you and know there is possible market for them in India?
In the music that we promote, I mean, with the international tours we've done, we've selected very, very random acts, very frankly. It's not been the big names, it's been a lot of upcoming artists with great videos or something that you can make a viral out of. At the same time, you need to love the music, of course. It's, as you said, it's a very personal thing. I mean, my agency is pretty much the music's dominated with what I prefer listening to or what the people who are working with me closely like. So, and at the same time, you need to create a USP for your agency. You can't be promoting everything and anything. So in that sense, I mean, as long as you're working strongly with promoters, which is very important. I have good promoters in different cities, so that allows me to choose unknown names and make it a successful gig. So it doesn't really take one thing, you know, it could be anything from a good video to a good song to anything, and personal contacts at the same time, you know.
Does it work in terms of promoters? Do you have, you know, promoters of different levels? I mean, in England you've got SJM, Metropolis, Live Nation, they're the sort of the big promoters, and then Eat Your Own Ears, me and All Tomorrow's Parties, and then subsidiary, you know, other ones as well. And so it's sort of different, you know, and I work very closely with SJM, Metropolis and Live Nation, and I co-promote acts with all three of those promoters, and it takes time to build those relationships so they don't just squash you, you know, like, does it work the same over here in terms of you have different promoters, you know, the Lady Gaga promoter, and then will that promoter promote the newest electronic act, or do they just do the Rolling Stones tour when they come here, or, you know, the big acts?
No, of course, there's different promoters for different forms of music. You can't have an Indian classical promoter promoting electronic music. So, in that sense, I mean, a Lady Gaga, again, the audience profile is different, yeah? Like, it's held in a posh club where you need someone to spend 30,000–40,000 to enter. You can't have your regular people who go to a reggae concert coming there. So there are different levels of promoters in every city, and I think we've worked a lot with independent promoters, so that's what I'm more familiar with. But yeah, for sure, that very various levels of promoters.
Because the big promoters in England, you know, they will work with a whole variety of genres of music. They don't just work with, you know, and they also are hungry for new talent, and they'll aggressively go for new talent and exclusively book on their festivals you know, and try and lock down those new bands just as much as I would, you know, sort of go after those.
Progress in the musical structure right now for someone to handle something like that. But anyway, I mean, just to wrap this discussion down, let me go from Sohail down to this side. If there were 3 things that you had to say an Indian band had to do to break outside the Indian touring circuit, if they had to go out and make it somewhere, any territory, whatever, irrespective of the genre and territory, what are 3 things you'd say a band has to do?
Make good music, make good footage, and learn how to promote yourself. Very important. Also, one other thing is being down to earth. Yeah, very important. The problem in India is everyone's a rock star before they're a rock star, and everyone's pampered. I think that's the biggest problem here. So that's.
Like John's been saying, first thing is make friends. I mean, we've made all our tours, releases on European labels just because the guys have made friends with artists and who in turn become label owners. So that's how we even get our gigs. So friends is important. With friends comes releases. When you release on international labels, that's what we do. We hardly release on Indian labels. We just have one album in India and that's it. And the third thing is obviously PR.
I think a good manager with sort of, you know, insightful and has a lot of contacts and knows how the business works. A good agent who works with that manager, and then label support is also very important, I think. But obviously the music, you know, that has to stand. That's the first thing, and then manager and a good agent, I think, will help a career of a band.
It's always the bum deal when you're at the end of the road, isn't it? I think, just to give a bit more advice to an Indian clan, it's not necessarily one of the 3 most important things, but you've taken all my ideas. So I was just going to say, at the moment, you know, compared to when I started in the business, eclecticism amongst selectors, like whether they be club DJs or radio play DJs or promoters even, is much more valuable now than it was. You know, the old days where you had one rock magazine and an indie magazine and a dance magazine, that does still exist a bit, but in the main the consumers are way more open-minded than they used to be. So I think, you know, you don't necessarily have to worry too much about which box you fit in, because actually the market is as good now as it's ever been for just coming out of the left field and people embracing that. I think the other important thing is be good with numbers, or make sure you've got someone that works with you that's good with numbers. Know how much you're spending to come here, make sure you keep good records. And I think the third thing is, that nobody else has mentioned, is capture information about everybody that ever comes to see you, however way you can. I think that's absolutely key. You know, even if you have to pay somebody to stand at the door and get people's email addresses. I know it's a bit of an old school kind of analogue way, and social networks replace that to a degree, but that's still not everything. And Tom makes sure for every single gig that he does that he's doing everything within his power to build up a mailing list, because I think that's a really useful way of developing.
Let's throw this open for questions if anyone wants to ask any of the panelists questions.
This is to John. How would do you proactively? So the one thing that I play for this band based out of Bombay. The one thing we found is not only that since it's a nascent scene, you have even the management is just about getting to that level where they can go. But also I would think there are a lot of venues, there are a lot of places where bands could be booked, which right now are not being looked at. So from your point of view, do you proactively create or find new venues where you could promote artists who you like? How much
in the UK, you mean?
In the UK.
I think one thing that we do is we're constantly looking for new promoters that we can work with, and often they tend to work in venues that we haven't come across before. So I think, yeah, definitely we would try to do that. But, you know, if I've got an artist that I represent and I'm struggling to find them bookings, normally it's beyond the scope of what an agent would do to then start trying to find or approach venues to put a band in. I mean, a lot of agents would take the view, if you can't get arrested with this band, then find another band. Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes.
Is that because there has been that much of penetration or that much of work done in the UK that, you know, most of the places which would have ever had that kind of music are already on your map? Or are there?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think if you're a professional promoter, the expectation from an agent would be that they'll find us. And now with the internet, anyone that wants to book a band, they'll be able to find their way to the agent, I think, in the main. But yeah, I think you're right. It's, you know, there are lots more places to play now, and a good agent, as opposed to a bad agent, might know better where else they could try if they were struggling to find something.
I mean, to add to that, in UK, I guess, because they have so many venues, I mean, it's just easier to book whatever is available. In India, in fact, the biggest struggle is venues in a lot of cities. And I'll give you an example of one tour we did recently with a group called Jazz Step Up from UK. And I wanted them to play in Calcutta as well. And Calcutta venues are fully to commercial music, yeah, so they didn't want to do it. So Nishit, in fact, who's here, these guys took up a rooftop and we had a party for 90 people and they loved it. So you have to be proactive and create your own spaces sometimes.
That's the mark of a really hardcore promoter in India, that they're actually going out there and creating new places where the music can happen and not just trying to, you know, pound on the same 10 places which do.
Yeah, I mean, it's important.
But that's because we have 10 places.
But it's the same in England. I mean, now, like, every day, the new thing is for us to find unusual venues. And it's a bane of my life. You know, it used to be exciting, and now it's boring. I'd rather just put them in the most obvious venue. Like, we'll come with a list, you know, be like 20 capacities, this, we have to get the bar, we have to get this license, we have to get this, bring the PA in, it's going to cost this. And this venue, oh yeah, we really like that one. And then the agents always go back to the first one.
If you were trying to promote a band in a place where you needed a show but there wasn't one, then it might not be something that you hate to do.
But it's not about not having venues available. It's about creating a buzz and excitement by using a venue to do that as an added bonus to the experience of the punter. It's not about, oh, we can't get that venue, so let's go and find a weird cave and put a PA in it.
Some warehouse thing has come up in there's been a big trend in the last 2 years of particularly electronic music promoters doing parties in car parks and in disused warehouses. Legally, in the old days they used to be illegal, but now they're legal. So that has happened, but I think that's a lot more to do with people trying to do something cool and alternative than because there aren't the venues there. There's loads of venues available, just some promoters to give a bit of an edge to what they're doing. Yeah, exactly. If it's in somewhere new, maybe the press would write about it more, but I think it's a lot of guff, frankly.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Going with what Sohail said, basically we had done this terrace thing, that scene we started. So basically, like mentioned earlier, like the venues, I mean the entry to a venue doesn't support the artist. I mean that scene does not exist in India. Especially I am talking about Calcutta, where I come from. So this, I mean, paying an entry for a night is not happening. No one.
I've got a question back to you. Do you, as a promoter, get a cut of the bar? Because I thought the drinks prices in Blue Frog were absolutely ridiculous, like insane.
That doesn't exist.
Insane. So until the promoter is getting a kickback from the bar, you guys are up against it seriously, because somebody's making a lot of money there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the real estate is expensive, right, and the venue probably costs a lot of money, but £18 for 2 drinks is just like crazy. That's twice what it would cost in London.
Yeah, so there's no price. So basically that's where we come from. So I think there has to be more of these things, like the way we started the terrace things. It started with 30 people paying the entry and whatever.
You know, to me, what would happen in England, for instance, if you had a venue where the promoter couldn't charge a ticket price, is the venue, the guy that owns the bar who's getting the revenue, they would subsidise the promoter to put the show on.
Yeah.
You know, that would be normal. So that maybe that's one of the conversations about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I thought the gradual thing that we saw was it started with 30 people paying an entry, and we started pushing the thing. We started telling the idea that this is how it has to happen. We have to cover the cost, so we pay the entry, cover the cost. We are bringing in artists. We have to take care of the fares and stuff that they have to do. So, and gradually we've seen a slight up. When the last gig we actually saved some money to do maybe a better gig next time. You know, we could actually put that money into a next event where we could add something more to it. So I think this scene, I mean, wherein we find more spaces wherein we could bring this idea, where people are paying, this idea of paying for a gig should come into India.
But you said as well that you know, artists in India expect to have everything paid for. Now, in Europe, if you're a young band coming up, you lose money on all your shows. Basically, the promoter breaks even, but if the gig costs more than the tickets, then the artist loses, not the promoter. So again, maybe artists themselves, either they need to have money from somewhere else, wherever that comes from, get a day job, you know, whatever it takes. Because artists are often the ones that are subsidising the gig at the beginning, not the promoter.
Yeah, which I guess in India that there is, most of the times, at least in Europe and in the UK, there is an ocean of a difference between a Coldplay and a band starting out. In India, a band starting out would play a Wednesday night at a club, and Friday night the Coldplay equivalent would play the same club, which doesn't happen outside the country. So that is where the massiveness of it gets too short, because the Coldplay equivalent band would probably get everything taken care of. Which means if I'm playing 2 nights before that in the same club, why should I get the same places? Yeah, so. Any other questions for the band?
I'll get the rest. I'll get the next band.
Okay. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Everybody cheer and go wild.